Good morning. We're going to begin our service with some scripture from Psalm 100, 1 through 5. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with singing. Know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him, bless his name. For the Lord is good, his steadfast love endures forever, and his faithfulness to all generations. Would you please stand with us?
Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way, from the earth to the cross. My debt to pay, from the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way, from the earth to the cross. My debt to pay, from the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high. You are holy. in his holy name. He is exalted, the King is exalted on high. He is exalted, the King is exalted on high. I will praise him. He is exalted forever, exalted.
So just invite you to stand with us, and we'll continue to lift the Lord up in praise.
Morning, everyone. Welcome all who are joining us. If you haven't been here for a while, we've been going through the book of Ruth. Just to kind of give you a heads up on that. We're going to be closing out that study today. And we left off last week at the end of chapter 3, and so we have this interaction that's been taking place here with Boaz and Ruth last week in chapter 3. And Ruth has proposed to Boaz. And so Boaz is willing to marry her, and he's willing to redeem the land. But there's somebody else ahead of him. And so we kind of dropped off there at the end of that, where Ruth goes back to Naomi with the grain that Boaz has given her, and Naomi encourages Ruth that Boaz will settle this matter this day. And so as we've been going through the book, we've been seeing God's faithful love demonstrated through Ruth and her loving kindness to her mother Naomi. We've seen Boaz and his loving kindness to showing or demonstrated towards Ruth in the way that he's treated her. And if you remember when we first started the book, there was this story of Naomi and her husband, or her husband and Naomi and her two sons, and they go to leave Bethlehem, Judea, to go to Moab, where they're seeking out food because there's a famine in the land. And while they're in that land, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, dies, and so do both her two sons after they marry Moabite women. There are no children from those marriages of Elimelech's sons, Mahlon and Chilion. And so Ruth and Naomi head back to Bethlehem because they had heard that God had visited his people, right? And showing them kindness with providing food. So they head back, and as they enter into Bethlehem, Naomi is bitter. She's bitter because her name means pleasant or sweet, but her life has been bitter, and she feels like God has been treating her harshly. Okay? She feels like she left full. She had her husband and her two sons, and she come back empty, even though she has her daughter-in-law with her. And so we see this problem at the beginning of the story, that Naomi has the situation that she's in, and she's one of God's chosen people, and yet she's feeling this way, and how is God going to deal with her to bring about what he has promised for his people? And so sometimes when we look at that, we say, well, why did this happen? Is Naomi, is she responsible for this? Did she do something to basically deserve this? And we don't know all the text doesn't tell us that. We do know that there's a famine in the land, and anytime there's famine, it must mean that God has withheld rain for their crops, and he had promised them in Deuteronomy chapter 28 that if they kept his commandments, if he kept that covenant there, that God would provide all that he had promised them. And then if they didn't keep it, then there would be these sorts of things that would come up, and there would be famine in the land, and there would be people who come in and would occupy, if you will, and cause the Israelites to become subservient to them. We see this spiral happening in the book of Judges, and that's the time in which Ruth takes place. It's in the time of the Judges, where the people are entering into the promised land, and they're going in there, and as they go in there, they follow the Lord for a while, but then they rebel, and as they rebel, God brings somebody in, another people to come in and basically occupy and take them over and make them servants of theirs. And so they cry out to God, and they repent of that, and they ask God to deliver them, and God raises up a judge, a commander to lead his people and to deliver them from this. And so things go on, and they go well for a while, and then it happens all over again. And so it's this kind of spiral that happens. It's a cycle that takes place, and it happens in people's lives as well, too. There are people who never get to the place where they really want to be. They'll follow the Lord for a little bit, and then they'll backslide, and they'll repent, and usually because things aren't going well in their life, and then they'll come before the Lord, and they'll say, I'm repenting of that, Lord, and the Lord will take them back, and things will go well for a while, and then they'll go back into into this rebellion again. And so you see that in many people's lives. And they wonder, why is it this way? Isn't God faithful to do what he says? Yes, he's faithful to do what he says. He is. Are we faithful to do what he says is the question, right? And so we don't really know all that's going on with Naomi. We can kind of gather some of that. But the thing is, she's gone away. She's left. She and her husband basically left Bethlehem, and they're looking for promise of a better life somewhere else, which is really outside, if you think about it, it's outside the promise of God. It's outside of the promised land and the promises of the covenant that God had promised to his people. So they're looking for what they should be looking for in the wrong place. But as she comes to this sense of emptiness or all that's taken place, the decision is made to go back to Bethlehem because God has been kind to his people. He has visited his people. And so for whatever reason, something in the hopelessness of Naomi's life, there is some sort of hope to go back to where she came from. If it wasn't good before, what makes it better now? Well, somehow or another, God seems to be better. And so she makes that decision to go back, and Ruth clings to her and showing this commitment, this loving kindness, this hesed, that's the Hebrew word there for this faithful, steadfast, loving kindness, this love there, this faithfulness that comes through covenantal relationship. And so this is all that's been taking place. And so as we've been going through that, we've been seeing how Ruth has responded. We've been seeing how Naomi's been reacting to all of this. And we see how Boaz in chapter 3 is stepping up. As in chapter 2, he's just a good guy who seemed to be a seemingly wealthy landowner, somebody who can anyway hire people to do some work on his land. And so Ruth heads up there and she gleans and he treats her very favorably, not only as just a regular gleaner, but as somebody who's actually a servant in his work crew, and blesses her with so much. And so Naomi wants to find rest for Ruth. We found out in chapter 3, right at the beginning there. She said, it's for me to find rest for you. It's for me. I desire that for you. That's the good thing that Naomi wanted to do to Ruth, since Ruth had been so faithful to her and clinging on to her. And Naomi's like, well, what do I really have to offer you? I don't have any more sons. There's nothing there. I need to find rest for you. And so they seek out this rest, this idea of rest, of a home and a husband that is going to be with Boaz. That's what they're seeking out. Well, as she proposes to Boaz, Boaz lets her know that there's somebody else in line. And so that's where we left the story at last time. As we look at Boaz, we get an idea of what kind of man he was. And if you know the story, you know that he ends up marrying Ruth, right? That's how the story is supposed to end, right? I mean, there's this man, he meets this woman, and they're kind to each other. They just treat each other so well. There seems to be some attraction there, and now we're just like, oh, the story, they got to come together. It's got to be like that. It's the perfect ending, right? And so God doesn't disappoint us with that. We do get that. So just to let you know, that's okay. But someone has said, what kind of man was Boaz before he married Ruth? And he's ruthless. Anyway, it was getting kind of heavy in here. We needed to lighten it up a little bit, okay? So we're going to get into it here in chapter 4, because we've been looking to the Lord to provide. I'm encouraging you to keep on trusting in the faithfulness of God, even when it doesn't look like the circumstances are in your favor. God is greater than our circumstances. And a lot of times we can't look above all of that. All we can see is what's right in front of our faces, and we can't get beyond that. And granted, there's a lot of things that are very sad, things that are heavy on our hearts, things that are very burdensome that we carry around with us. But we still have to look up because God hasn't changed. And so that's what we need to be encouraged to do. And that's what I've been trying to encourage us to do that throughout, because there's good things promised to us. And so we need to trust the Lord and look to him to fulfill his promises, because he will overcome any and all obstacles, okay? Any and all obstacles, God can overcome that. So that's the big idea. Look to the Lord to fulfill his promises, overcoming any and all obstacles, okay? Turn with me to Ruth chapter 4. We're going to read through this and we're going to finish up this beautiful, and we call it a story. It's a real historical account, you know. And so when I say story, don't get mad at me, okay? I'm not saying that the Bible isn't God's word. I'm not saying these aren't factual things. They can still be a story and be factual, okay? So if I call it a story, it's because this is part of the historical narrative that God has given to us, but he's given it to us wrapped up in this account here that's taking place here. It's a story. It has all the elements of story. It's got, you know, introduction of characters. It's got scenes that take place. It's got problems that need solutions. It's got a beautiful, happy ending and all of that stuff too. Okay? So in that sense, that's what I'm referring it to. Not to diminish at all the importance, nor the inerrancy, nor the authority of God's word. Okay? So don't come down too hard on me if I use that word. Okay? After all, isn't history his story? Right? Okay, just wondering. All right. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there. Verse 1, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. Then Boaz said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahlon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now, these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Aminadab. Aminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. And this is the word of the Lord. So we pick up here, and just like Naomi said, Ruth is acting, and he's acting quickly. That very day, after he had sent Ruth home in the morning, he goes into the city gates, which is where they would conduct business transactions there. And it says he went up there, and as he got there, he sat down. And then, behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, turn aside, friend, and sit down here. And he turned aside and he sat down. So Boaz goes up there and he sees his this relative, this Redeemer who was spoken of, and he comes by. And so Boaz, he's not mentioned there at all. He just comes, and it says, so turn aside, friend. And commentators will tell you that that's a Hebrew idiomatic a word there that's kind of like a non-named person. It's kind of like so-and-so or Mr. whatever your name is type of thing. So they don't put his name in there. His name is not recorded at all in all of this. And, part of that is probably, some commentators would make the point that say, well, the idea here is that he has no name because he has no legacy. He has no inheritance. He has nothing good because he wouldn't step up and redeem. Okay, so that's what some commentators say. We don't know. It could be that maybe they're protecting this guy so that his family didn't have to deal with this for the rest of their lives. That we have this great-great-great-grandfather there who was a guy who wouldn't step up and do what he should have done in helping out his people or a relative. So we don't know. He's just, it says friend, and some others might say whatever. Okay? Our first point here is, as we're saying, that we want to look to the Lord to fulfill his promises because he can overcome any and all obstacles. The idea is the Lord meets our needs in a world of needs. Okay? The Lord meets our needs in a world of need. A world of needs. So Boaz goes up there. He went to the city. He gave the nearer Redeemer the chance to redeem Ruth. And so as he brought him up there, he tells him to sit down. And then he takes 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. And so they sit down. So he's gathered up the legal assembly. He's got men there who can witness whatever transaction is going to take place. He's got this nearer Redeemer, this nearer kinsman that's here. And he wants to talk to him in the witness of these people. And so this is what he says. He said to the Redeemer in verse 3, he said, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling a parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. If you remember, I told you that all the land belonged to God. So there never was any real selling. It was more like a lease. Okay, it was like renting it out for a certain amount of time, and there was a 7-year period. It's a time from Jubilee to the next time of Jubilee. And so in that time, somebody could basically sell their land for the period of however many years until Jubilee, and they would base the price on how many harvests they could have before that time. Because at the year of Jubilee, whatever was owed was supposed to be forgiven, if you remember, right? And so those things are supposed to be forgiven. And so the land is being sold because Naomi is impoverished here. She doesn't have anything. And if you remember, Boaz is taking care of Naomi and Ruth by giving them grain, but they still don't have any land. They don't have anything to call their own. There is no promise. There's no land as if, which is what they had before with Elimelech, because everybody got land when they came into the promised land. That's why it's called the promised land. Okay? And so Boaz approaches this nearer kinsman, and in verse 4 he said, so I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. So he asked him, are you gonna step out and do this? And there's really not any reason for the guy not to do it. I mean, it's all good, right? I'll pay for the land. I'll have this harvest for me. And in his mind, he could be thinking, look, here you go. You got this Naomi. She's an old widow. I don't have to worry about having any kids with her. So once she dies, she has no more kids around. Once she dies, that land's mine, and my farm gets bigger, right? My land is more. And so Boaz brings this to him, and he says, if you will redeem it, in verse 4, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one else. There's no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. So it's just the two of them. And so Boaz says, you have the right of first refusal. If you're not going to do it, then I'm going to do it. Listen what happens here in verse 4, at the end of verse 4. And he said, I will redeem it. Uh-oh. Well, see, we read past this, so we already know what's happening. But, it seemed like it was just going to be so easy, right? Boaz is going to figure all this out. He's going to do it. He's going to make it work out. He's going to approach this guy, and this guy is just going to, God is going to work favorably, and this guy is going to say, no, I'm not going to do that, And it's going to be Boaz is going to step in. He's going to take care of Naomi by purchasing her land this way. He was going to take care of Ruth because he was going to be able to marry her and all of that sort of stuff. But now he brings this up, and this guy says, I'm going to do it. I'm going to redeem it. So then here's what happens. Here's what Boaz does, and he's a pretty smart guy. Then Boaz said in verse 5, he said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. So we have some of this understanding of this why this custom is the way it is, and that's back in the book of Leviticus where it talks about this, and I think I maybe have a slide on that? Maybe not? Oh, okay. Maybe I have it later. I'm gonna jump in. I'll come back. Can I put those in there? Sorry about that. They wouldn't be different colors, but they would be the same way. But I'm not sure what happened to them, so I'm just going to act like they didn't exist. Okay, so there. Oh, okay. There it goes. Thank you. It wasn't in the queue. It must have been at the end, okay? So if you read Leviticus 25, starting in 23, it says, the land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. This is God speaking. For you are strangers and sojourners with me, and in all the country you possess, you shall allow a redemption of the land. If your brother becomes poor and sells part of his property, then his nearest redeemer shall come and redeem what his brother has sold. If a man has no one to redeem it and then himself becomes prosperous and finds sufficient means to redeem it, let him calculate the years since he sold it and pay back the balance to the man to whom he sold it and then return to his property. But if he does not have sufficient means to recover it, then when he's sold, what he sold shall remain in the hand of the buyer until the year of Jubilee, and the Jubilee it shall be released and he shall return to his property. So there's this idea of this purchase of the land and how that works. I think, is there another slide after that in Deuteronomy chapter 25? Okay, it says, if brothers dwell together, and this is the idea of marrying the relative here. It says, if brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And the first son whom she bears shall succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. Is there anything else after that? And if the man does not wish to take this brother's wife, then his brother's wife shall go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to perpetuate his brother's name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother to me. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him. And if he persists, saying, I do not wish to take her, then this brother's wife shall go up to him in the presence of the elders and pull his sandal off his foot and spit in his face. And she shall answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. And the name of his house shall be called in Israel, the house of him who had his sandal pulled off. So you see, this is a very serious matter, and understand this. There's the background for it. There's the law that's given, but you have particular customs that are happening too in this area. So do they stick to the letter of the law to the nth degree? Probably not. But they have the principles in here. And in this case, this guy is not a brother of Elimelech anyway. He's just a relative. So he has the obligation, in a sense, to do this for the land, to help that. But he also, it's kind of a voluntary thing to, you have Ruth here, who is a Moabite, okay, it's enemies of Israel, and you didn't have to marry a Moabite. And not only that, Boaz kind of paints her in a bad light. He says, Ruth is a Moabite, and she's the widow of the dead. This lady is double cursed, and you want her as your wife? And so he's putting it out there. He's stacking the cards against this guy so that he doesn't want to go after her. Furthermore, when he puts it out that way, he recognizes, okay, I get the land. If it's just Naomi, it's just me and the land. Once Naomi's gone, that's great. If it's Ruth, then I got to marry Ruth, and I have to have a child, and the firstborn gets this land, and I'm going to be the one who has to do all the work and get it going and all that sort of stuff. And he says, no, I don't want to do that. He says he cannot do it. He says, if I do that, it will impair my own inheritance, it says in verse 6. So, Boaz gives them a way to bow out. He's doing this in front of the public of the people. They don't seem to go and spit on his face or do any of that sort of stuff. The sandal is given as a way, and it tells us here that that's how they confirmed the transaction in verse 7. It was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging to confirm a transaction. The one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was the manner of attesting in Israel. Is there anything about spitting in somebody's face and telling them that they're messed up and they didn't do what they're supposed to do? But this guy is not really looked at favorably, okay? They don't belabor the point to kind of trash his name or any of his character or anything like that, but they don't paint him in a very positive light because he wasn't willing. He's willing, right, to do it when the land looked good for him, but then once it comes down to this other thing here with Ruth now, and now knowing that, I have to perpetuate the name of a dead person so that they can have a legacy, they can have an inheritance, this family can have some land, and I'm going to lose all that, then he's not willing to. So in that sense, it's negative, okay? And so he goes with this, and so Boaz just kind of steps in there and says, okay, I'm going to do it. And so he says in verse 8, so when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahlon, and also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife to perpetuate the name of the dead and his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. So as Boaz steps in there and he's willing to do this, we know that Boaz has some means. We don't know to what degree he has means. But whatever it is, he's willing to do this. And so this kind of elevates his character once again, shows you that he is this worthy man. He's not trying to take advantage of anybody. He wants to do the right thing, and he is committed to doing it. This act of what we call chesed, this loving kindness, this steadfast love that's shown within the community, within the family in relational love. And so he's willing to do this. And so we got this idea. This is Boaz here. And we see a picture of Christ in Boaz. It's not one for one. It's not something that you just want to keep on making, as they say, illustration that walks on all fours. There are some points in Boaz's character for sure. He's willing to do what it takes. He's worthy, he's able, and he's committed to do it. And so he does. He's willing to step in there in the same way that Christ, we talk about redeeming us. Paying the price, even at personal sacrifice, right? Great price personally. And so this is Boaz. We get this picture of him. And so, but all that we need to understand in all of this is that behind the scenes, and God isn't mentioned a whole lot, okay, when I mean that, it's not like everything's God doing this, God's doing this. If you remember in chapter 2, Ruth happened to show up at Boaz's field. And we talked about the idea of happening as just a chance encounter, but it was really God ordaining and engineering all of that to bring it about. And so God is involved in all of this too. He is providing to meet not only Naomi's needs in this, but also Ruth's needs, right? Ruth wants a husband. And also Boaz's need, okay? He wants this wife here. We don't know if Boaz had another wife. We know that he was ruthless, right? But we don't know if he had another wife. We don't even know if he had children, okay? So, but he's willing to step out in here, and he's willing to do that, and God is providing this for all of these people. He's meeting their needs, and there's so many different needs that need to be met in the world that sometimes we think God can't meet mine. Remember, Naomi's like, man, I left full and now I'm empty. You know, there's nothing for me. I have no hope. And now God is working through all of this to meet her needs as well. So the Lord meets our needs in a world of needs, okay? Remember that. Verse 11, then all the people were at the gate, and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. So the people here, the witnesses, make this blessing on Boaz. And they don't even name Ruth, right? They said, may the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah. So the idea here is that even though they're not mentioning Ruth here, she is going to be a blessing to Boaz, or they're praying that she would be that way, that she would, his wife would be a prolific childbearer. I mean, if he's going to be like Rachel and Leah, 12 sons, right, to Jacob. So, and then they also want Boaz to be renowned. We want you to be famous in Bethlehem. And then the last thing is that they're saying that his clan, Boaz's family, would be huge like Perez. And if you look in the book of Numbers, I don't have chapter and verse off the top of my head, but I think as you're counting all these families and these clans, Perez has like 76,500 people of the 600,000 people that are counted there. So there's a big number there, and it seems to be the biggest of all, okay? This is of Judah. Perez comes from Judah, okay? And so they're asking this blessing on them, okay, for Boaz because of what he's done. Then I'm going to move quickly here. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became, in verse 13, here's the next thing. The Lord demonstrates his love for us. The Lord demonstrates his love for us. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception. She bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. So Boaz takes Ruth to be his wife. She becomes his wife. They have relations, and the Lord opens her womb. And here it is a reminder here that the Lord gave her conception. She bore a son. She didn't have any kids from her previous husband. They came back empty-handed. Naomi didn't have any grandkids, right? She comes back now, and now Ruth is going to be this way of providing her with the grandkid. It says here, then the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Isn't it ironic that when Naomi enters Bethlehem, she says, I'm empty, I have nothing. I left with a husband and 2 sons, and now I come here, and Ruth's right there with her, and she says, I got nothing. And Ruth becomes this instrument of blessing to Naomi. It says here that these ladies are telling her. See, Naomi doesn't say this for herself, okay? Her dignity remains intact, right? It says here, these ladies tell her. They tell her that, blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life. She's talking about the baby. You're not talking about Boaz. So he takes this Redeemer thing and transfers it to this baby, Obed, who will be a nourisher of Naomi in her old age. And it says, and a restorer of life. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Wow. A Moabite woman is better than 7 Jewish sons. Talk about turning the tables here, huh? See, the whole thing here is sometimes we get this view, we get kind of in the Jewish people, it's an ethnocentric view of things that I'm better than everybody else, and this is how it goes. That's why, when you think about the story of the Good Samaritan, that's why it has such a shocking impact there. You have a priest, and then you have a Levite. So you're thinking, here's a priest. He's a holy guy. He'll help this guy out. He doesn't. Then you got this Levite. Surely he's a holy person. He'll help him out too. Well, the next person in line is the godly Jew. But you don't. You jump right to the Samaritan, and they're like, Samaritan? Get him out of here. Here it is. Here's this Moabite woman who is worthy. She's shown this faithful love there. And it says she's worth more to you than 7 sons. And she's given birth to this grandson. Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. So you see, this baby becomes Naomi's basically, right? And she's all happy. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying the son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. So the Lord demonstrates his love. Boaz marries Ruth. Ruth had a son. Naomi had a grandson who filled up her emptiness. And so God is working in all of that. At the beginning of the story, it wasn't happening, right? Right? Naomi was like, it's over. There's nothing for me really to live for, I'm empty. God has dealt with me bitterly. My name is sweet and pleasant, but he's changed it to bitterness, remember? So that's how she's feeling, but God's just kind of completely reversed all of this now. Furthermore, it's not over yet. If it was just a love story, boom, it's over, but it's not. Here it is, verse 18. Here's the idea. The Lord remembers and remembers us in our acts of loving kindness. Remember, Boaz steps out there. He's willing to redeem. Now, these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. And so the writer here, the author, 10 generations there. Once again, this completeness type of thing, right? 10 generations to show just how God remembers us in our acts of loving kindness. He remembers what Boaz does. He remembers what Ruth has done, and how they've acted in this faithful love, this steadfast commitment to do what is right and to operate with integrity. And God remembers it. And not only this, right? We know that if you go and look in Matthew chapter 1, you see Boaz and Ruth in Christ's genealogy, right? So not just remembering them here, which is what they had prayed before, the blessings had been that they would be renowned and be famous, but into subsequent generations, even to where we are now, right? Thousands of years later. So what's this book about? Well, yeah, it's about Naomi and it's about Ruth and Boaz, but it's about God and his faithfulness to his people. That the promises that he's made, he doesn't forget about them. He continues to perpetuate the promises that he made to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob, and he carries those things through. And that's what you're seeing here, even in this time, in the darkest of times, in the times of the judges. Remember when every man did as he pleased, it says there? That even in this time of the judges, this dark time, that God steps in and you don't know how he's going to do it. It's kind of like like one of those movies where you see a boxing match or a wrestling match or something, be it Rocky or whomever, and the guy is getting beaten. You're just wondering when's going to happen, and it's like he's in a bad position. He can't overcome, and all of a sudden there's this dramatic reversal and everything changes. And what we had hoped for happens. And that's what this is letting us know, that God steps in there to show he He showed his faithful love to an Israelite and to a Moabite widow who were needy, who felt unloved and forgotten. And in the midst of crazy circumstances, he showed his faithful love to them to bring them from death to life. Remember, that's what she talked about there. From bitterness to happiness and from emptiness to fullness. See, the thing is, we find ourselves in the middle of the story in our lives. And we're like, how's it going to finish? How's this going to end? What's going to happen? Is God able to do this? You know I read Ruth and I read that book, and those were some difficult times, but those were, a long time ago. It's not as tough as it is now. They didn't have the government we got now, They didn't have the rules we have now. They didn't have this that we have now, and we think our circumstances are insurmountable. We think that God can't make this dramatic reversal. He can't change it. He can't work through where we are to bring about something that he's promised us. He's promised us, first of all, in Ephesians chapter 1, he says that we have been blessed with every spiritual blessing in the heavenlies in Jesus Christ. If we have Christ, we have it all. Yes, it may not look like you got it all right now, but just wait. And see, can we believe God for the promises that he's given to us? Can we take God at his word that it really will be that good? Even if we struggle in this life. It tells us in another place that the struggles we go through right now cannot compare to the glory that will be revealed to us when we go to be with the Lord. Can we take God at his word for that? It's not easy when you're in the middle of it, right? Where do you find yourself in the story? Are you heading out with your husband and your 2 sons like Ruth did with the hope of a great new life apart from God? If that's where you're heading, I would suggest you turn around and head back to the Lord so that you don't have to go through the hard times that make you go back, right? Are you coming back from a real difficult time in your life where you've lost something or somebody and you've gone through a lot of pain and you're wondering, oh, God has dealt with me this way. He's been bitter towards me. And I'm bitter inside. And you don't think he can ever change that? It's just going to be like this for the rest of your days? Are you in a situation where somebody is promising to do something, but they don't know if they can carry it out, and so you're waiting to find out what's going to happen? See, where you find yourself in the story is really gonna paint a lot of the picture of what you're looking for in the future. But the thing is, God hasn't changed. He tells us he'll provide for our needs. He tells us that we have an inheritance with him in heaven that is beyond what we can imagine here. And he just says, remain faithful. Keep on persevering in prayer. Keep on persevering in life. I know it's not a lesson, it's not something we like to hear when we're in the middle of it, but we need to hear it. We need to be reminded that that's how it is. Because the circumstances can cloud the reality, right? We can forget what's really going on here. And so I encourage you to continue to look to the Lord to fulfill his promises, overcoming any and all obstacles.